Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to go through a few sourdough recipes. I've got a sourdough bacon and cheddar biscuit that's delicious, a sourdough peach cobbler, and I'm also going to be sharing some different ways that we are preserving around here. I am preserving cream. I could only buy this in bulk, and so I am freezing it. I didn't know that cream freezes really well, so I'm freezing it in an ice tray, and then I will put these into a plastic bag, and they'll just be easy for individual use. And since this is a half-gallon container and the only one that they were selling at Walmart, I am going to freeze pint jars of this. So I only need a little bit of it right now, so I'm going to freeze the rest, and it freezes great, and then you can whip it when you're done, when you thaw it out, and it just works really good as a way to preserve cream. So I'm filling up these jars, and then I am going to label them so that I make sure I remember when they were frozen and what it is in the jar. I just don't want them to get lost in my deep freezer, and the labels really help when you're storing and preserving food. You can also you can write on these jars or on the lids. I'm using some labels that are the ball labels, and you can get them at Walmart in the canning section, but you can also just write on the jar or the lid. Since I froze these, I did take one out and brought it to my daughter's house and whipped it up for whipped cream, and it worked perfectly. So freezing cream is an awesome way to preserve it. So it's a great way to have cream on hand and not have to go buy it at the store for future baking products or for whipping. The next recipe I'm going to share with you is my sourdough bacon cheddar biscuits. These are delicious. Now I am chopping up 6 slices of bacon. You can also use bacon pieces or bacon bits that you already have on hand if you like. It ends up being half a cup of crisped bacon. But I'm also going to be using the grease from the bacon, which you can substitute for butter if you are just using bacon bits or bacon pieces that you already have on hand. So it ends up being a half a cup of crisped bacon, and 1/4 of a cup of bacon grease. And then I'm just going to measure out the rest of my ingredients. I have a cup of flour, a cup of sourdough starter, some teaspoons of baking powder. I've got a cup of sharp shredded cheddar cheese and some maple syrup. And first you mix together your dry ingredients, then you add your wet ingredients, and then just fold that together really gently. And then I just turn it out onto a floured surface. I'm going to fold it over a few times to kind of build some layers in there and help them be flakier biscuits. Now, if you wanted these to be long ferment, you could just put them in the refrigerator for a few hours at this point. And I'm assuming these are made without long fermentation, but you could leave them in the refrigerator for about 4 hours if you like. If you really want to long ferment them overnight, then what you want to do is keep the baking powder out of the recipe, put your dough in the refrigerator, let it long ferment overnight, and then knead in your baking powder. And then you will go ahead with the rest of the recipe. So I am actually cutting these with a biscuit cutter, but you don't have to. You could cut them with a knife. They could be in the shape of triangle scones or just in squares. When you cut them with a knife, they do rise a lot better on the sharp cuts. But I really like this biscuit cutter. So I'm also covering these with cream. You could also use melted butter, but it's a super easy biscuit, great for an easy weeknight dinner, a perfect side for any soup or salad. And I'm baking these in a preheated 400-degree oven for about 15 minutes until they're golden on top. Now I will link this recipe in the description below if you'd like to print it off. But the combination of bacon and cheddar with the sourdough is just so delicious that these are perfect for, they're perfect for dinner, but they're also great for a breakfast sandwich. So after making these and giving my husband one with butter on it, he said, you need to put an egg on that. So I decided, that was a good idea. So I did fry up some eggs and make an egg sandwich out of these cheddar and bacon sourdough biscuits. This is just a super easy sourdough bread recipe for anyone that is just starting with sourdough. Biscuits is one of the best recipes to start with because You don't have to long ferment it. It has a really great flavor. They're super easy to make. And the sourdough starter and the baking powder or baking soda have a chemical reaction that just make them fluff up really nice and puffy. And so they always turn out great. I do have a recipe for just sourdough cheddar biscuits, which is wonderful, but this one just takes it to a whole new level of delicious with the bacon and the bacon grease. If you are looking for a really good weekend recipe, these egg sandwiches would be delicious. It's kind of like a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit, except for the bacon and the cheese is in the biscuit, and so all you really have to do is make the eggs and put it on top. If you haven't made eggs this way, my dad taught me to do this. You put your eggs in a frying pan, then you put a little bit of water in there, put the lid on it, and then the steam cooks the top of the egg. A lot of my kids do not like a runny yolk. I really love it, and so I cook it this way for myself. But of course you could scramble the eggs and then put scrambled eggs on there for kids. But this was delicious, and I definitely recommend giving it a try. All right, next I am going to move on to preserving. I'm going to be pressure canning some chicken pot pie filling, and my son is helping me prepare for that. One thing I love doing with my kids is cooking, especially letting them help me prep fruits and vegetables. Kids really love peeling and chopping fruits and vegetables, just like they love coloring and cutting paper, and it helps them with their fine motor skills, but also gives them something fun to do and helps them feel important. And so my son, he loves doing that with me, and I appreciate his help. So for the chicken pot pie, I'm just prepping all my vegetables first. So the vegetables are the trio, which is onions, carrots, and celery, plus I'm using the Yukon Gold potatoes, and we are peeling those because you can't can them with the peel on them safely. At least it's not tested safe. And then frozen peas. So you don't have to prep the frozen peas, but everything else, the carrots and the potatoes, have to be peeled. I do like to chop my carrots nice and thick so that they don't get too mushy in the jar. And then the celery and onion is just normal chopped. And then I'm putting these all in bowls separately because I am going to be cold packing this. I think a lot of people are intimidated by canning and preserving, or they just think it's so hard. But honestly, it's just a muscle that when you get used to using, it ends up becoming like second nature, and it gets really easy. Especially cold packing things, because you don't have to cook it first. You can just put it together in the jar and then pressure can it. It really doesn't take that much time. Most of the time, the food is in your pressure canner on the stove, and you don't have to do anything about it except for set a timer. But pressure canning is a very safe way to preserve healthy food. There's no preservatives in this food, no chemicals. The only seasonings are salt, pepper, and thyme in this recipe. I'm going to be using some homemade bone broth that I had simmered in the refrigerator and leftover rotisserie chicken. So it's already cooked and ready to go. There's really nothing more convenient than pulling a jar of already made soup or chicken pot pie filling or sloppy joe filling out of the pantry and heating it up for a healthy dinner or lunch. And it's healthy for your family, and it fills you up with healthy, convenient food. So if you're on the fence about learning how to can or pressure canning, I highly recommend that you just get started, because you'll really enjoy being able to make healthy, delicious, safe food for your family that's super easy to just pull out. It's great for emergency preparedness so that you have food on hand. If anything in this crazy world happens, you've got that there, and it feels really good. It's also a really good way to save money. All these ingredients just cost me a couple dollars, but this is going to make 8 quarts of chicken pot pie filling, which would cost a ton of money to buy at the store. But your jars are reusable. You only have to buy new lids every time, and the food only costs you a couple dollars, especially if you're growing it in your garden. So it's a great way to save money. It's super fun. It's so convenient to have the food stored on your shelf, and it preserves it safely. So I'm just layering the ingredients into each jar, and started with the salt and the pepper and the thyme, and then just moved through the potatoes, the onions, the chicken, and the carrots, celery, and peas. And then I will fill each jar with broth. You can also use water. You do not have to use broth. Using the broth actually turns this chicken pot pie filling a little bit darker for the finished product, whereas if you were to use water, your chicken pot pie filling would be a lot brighter in the jar, and you'll see that at the end of this section of the video. But I enjoy the flavor of the homemade chicken bone broth and, of course, the nutritional benefits. Now, when you go to make a chicken pot pie, you're going to drain the liquid out, and you're going to make a roux and then add the liquid in to thicken in that roux, and then add back your vegetables to that, and that will be your filling for your chicken pot pie. So then you'll just make a pie crust real quick, pour that in, cover it with another pie crust, and bake it at 375 degrees until it's golden brown. So a lot easier than making it from scratch, but still a process. This could also be a soup. It doesn't have to be a chicken pot pie. You could have a chicken pot pie soup with no pie crust. Both ways, this will be very delicious and super convenient and nice to have on hand for busy days. When you're canning, you need to make sure not to overfill your jars. So I am filling these and leaving 1-inch headspace. Then I'm going to go through, I'm using a butter knife, which, yeah, you have to be careful not to hit your jar or hurt your jar with a butter knife. But I'm just taking out any air bubbles that are in there and making sure that the water level is right. And I'm leaving 1-inch headspace. And then I'm going to add to each jar a teaspoon of lemon juice. And then I'm going to go through the regular process with canning. So I'm going to clean each rim of the jar with a little bit of vinegar on a clean washcloth to make sure that there's no bits of food or pieces on there before I put on the lid. And that helps to make sure that the lid can seal onto the jar with a really clean contact between the lid and the rim of the jar. And then I will screw on these bands to hold that lid on, and you just screw them on till they're finger tight. So you don't crank them down, you just screw them till they're tight, and then put these into the pressure canner. And these just look beautiful, so I'll give you a little picture of these before they go into the canner. Okay, so for prepping the pressure canner, it's really easy. You're going to make sure it's clean, add 3 quarts of water. Then I always add a splash, a couple tablespoons of vinegar so that my jars stay clean while they're processing. Otherwise, they get a yucky film on them. And then I'll turn my stove on low. And I am going to put my lids in here, or put my jars in here. And then I'm going to check my lid, make sure that the rubber ring around my lid is good, make sure that everything is working right on my lid, so the steam vent's working and the safety button is working, and then I will go ahead and put my lid on top. My Presto pressure canner has a little arrow on one side on the lid and on the pan so that you know how to put it on and tighten it together. And then I will turn my canner onto full heat and let it steam for 10 minutes. And the steam will just come up through that middle pipe that comes up, and let that steam for 10 minutes. And then I'm going to add my weighted gauge. Since I'm at over 2,000 feet elevation, I am using 15 pounds of pressure. That's my pressure gauge right there. And this first little button pops up when it comes to pressure. You don't set your timer for the 90 minutes of processing time until the weighted gauge starts to jiggle back and forth. And then you set your timer. These process for 90 minutes. Then I let them cool off in the pan. And then they're beautiful and ready to go for a couple years on the shelf. Of course, I'll be linking the recipes below for you. I was headed to the farmer's market and then saw that Hengler's orchard was open and went in to see what they had. And they had all their different peaches ready to go. at a great price. So I went in there and bought a couple boxes of, I believe these are Alberta peaches, and they just have a beautiful color. They're freestone peaches, so they're easy to get the seed away from the fruit. And I am just peeling and slicing 6 of these into a 9x13 pan. Now, these peaches are definitely bigger than most peaches that you buy, so my pan is really full. I'm sure that this recipe would have worked with 4 or 5 peaches instead of 6, just because they were so big. This is a sourdough peach cobbler, so the ingredients are 1 cup of flour, and I'm mixing the dry ingredients first. So 1 cup of flour, 1 cup of sugar, a teaspoon of baking powder, a half a teaspoon of salt. Then I whisk that together and add a half a cup of melted butter, and I added a half a cup of sourdough starter and give that a whisk. It is a liquidy cobbler mixture, and it's supposed to be. And then you're going to pour this over your fruit. So peaches for peach cobbler. Give it a little spread to make sure it's evenly on top, and then I am going to put these into a preheated 375-degree oven for about an hour until it's golden on top. It's peach season, and I hope that you all have the chance to make a delicious peach cobbler. I will be linking this recipe in the description box below. As always, thank you so much for watching my video. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and we'll see you next time.